What's up, everybody? Welcome back to FFT. I'm Trevor, and today we're talking about how to create a fantasy football league and who to invite. Let's check it out. All right, so today we're going to go through some steps on how to make sure that your fantasy football league is successful and also a lot of fun for both you and everyone that's part of the league. First, you actually have to pick the type of league that you want to participate in, whether it be redraft, keeper, dynasty, best ball, or even like a salary cap type league. You got to figure out, first of all, what do you want to participate in? And then from there, you can start building onto it. If you want to know more about the different types of leagues, I recommend checking out one of my earlier videos on one of those main 4 types of leagues. But when it comes to redraft, that's for mostly new players, people that haven't played a lot of fantasy football in the past. It gives them an opportunity to try out new strategies, really test the waters when it comes to fantasy football, and it's very little commitment. If they don't enjoy it after one season, they can just leave and you can bring somebody else into the league. So it hurts less when they leave the league that way. With a keeper, it's kind of inching closer to dynasty in the sense that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people or players that you can keep from year to year. This kind of is like putting training wheels on for fantasy football in regards to taking steps closer to dynasty, because now you're keeping players from year to year and you can either benefit from good picks that you have, or maybe it could be potentially a negative thing for you and your team because you didn't have any good picks and now you're kind of trying to fight back the next season when everybody else already has good potential players that they can choose from. Dynasty is one of my favorites. Only because you have a roster and you're stuck with that roster from year to year, aside from drafting new rookies and picking up players that are showing up off the waiver wire, adjusting based off injuries, things like that. And then there's a lot of trading both in season and off season, which I really enjoy, because when football season isn't around, man, what else is there to do, right? And then salary cap, it's kind of a newer one. I just joined a league, so I don't know as much about salary cap. I know that it's not like a typical snake draft where you're going back and forth picking players up once it gets to your turn. It's more of a bidding system where you have a certain amount of fake money that you can use to bid on players based off their projected value. So like Travis Kelce, for example, you may bid more on to try to get because he's one of the top tight ends as opposed to like a Tyler Higbee or something else like that. So you gotta pick the league type. That's very important because that's kind of the foundation of your league. Whether or not you're catering towards new players or experienced players, you got to figure out the type of league in order to start bringing players into the league. You got to make sure that the players fit the type of league that you're building. League size, let's talk about that for a second. In one of my earlier videos too, when I talked about league settings, I recommend checking that out as well. I discussed how kind of like an 8 to 12 man league is ideal. You're really looking for the ability to pick quality players up, have enough quality players and top-notch players to go around throughout the league, but you also don't want to be so saturated that you're never having to look into the waiver wires or trade picks. You're just, you have such good players that they're just always on your bench and you can go through. That's not fun. And on the flip side, you don't want to have so many teams that you're having to pick up, secondary running backs or wide receivers for your active roster. That's no fun either. So you want to try to find that middle ground. 8 to 12 is probably ideal. If you don't have that many friends or family that are interested, you can do 6, you can do 4. Just be aware of the sort of issues that you may come across. If you have a ton of friends, man, what I'd recommend doing, honestly, is creating a second league if you really want to play that bad and add all those people. I wouldn't recommend going over 12 because once you do that, it just makes drafting a lot more difficult because you're now picking up players that you don't even know who they are, that names you've never heard of. So I would recommend capping out at 12 and then maybe adding or creating a secondary league for those other players if you really want them to be part of your league that bad. Next, you have to pick a platform. So I typically use Sleeper as my favorite sort of app to use for fantasy football. They've got a great phone app that you can manage very easily. You can draft from there. I usually draft on my computer and then just manage my roster on my phone. That works really well. It's also free, so that's something to consider. There are leagues out there that you have to pay for, so make sure you're aware of that prior to signing up or committing to a certain platform. There's also ESPN. I know there's Yahoo. I know there's NFL Fantasy. There's CBS. There's lots of ones out there that you can do. I think Underdog's a new one that's coming up. I'm hearing a lot about. You check all those out. See what might be a best fit for you. The sort of commissioner controls that you have. That's a big deal, especially for those of you watching this video. I assume you're the commissioners of your league or the people that want to know more about these types of things. You know, shop around, see what's a good fit. But I recommend at least taking a look at Sleeper if you haven't already. Next, determine the seriousness of your league. It can be as serious or as lax as you want. It really can be. I'm part of I have a family league that's a little bit more lax, and I do some crazy draft strategies that I normally wouldn't do, just because there's less knowledge about the NFL in my family league. There's less investment in that league as well, which is fine, but it just means that the league overall is a little bit more lax. And then you also have, your middle of the road, and then you have your intense, serious. We draft in person. We take, 8-hour blocks to draft, and we're gonna, have beer and pizza and nachos and hang out for the entire afternoon. And then you're committed both in season and out of season. You've got players all over the spectrum. So as a commissioner, you need to decide where do you fall in that, and what are you looking for out of this league? And then from there, with all these building blocks, you can start to then bring in members to this sort of fantasy squad. Let's see. So now you're pretty much ready to go. So let's talk about inviting people. Obviously, friends, family would be my biggest recommendations. You can find people online. I know there's like Discord communities. There's online places that you can find people and put together a league. I wouldn't recommend doing that if I were you. If you have people that are available to you in your community, whether locally or nationally or internationally, people that you know and love, that you feel comfortable talking with on a daily basis, weekly basis, engaging with. Trash talk is a big one for me. I'm super competitive, so I enjoy that sort of stuff. So I recommend going to friends and family first. If you can't build a full league out of the amount of people that you know, that's fine. Either have a smaller league, like I said, 4, or you can find people online as well, whether it's through Discord or it's just a quick internet search away if you want to try to find people. All right, so let's talk about some attributes of the sort of people that you want to bring into your league. First, let's talk about must-haves, things that the people that you're bringing on need to have in order for your league to be both successful and fun. Those are the 2 things that I'm looking for when I'm creating this list. The first is that they have to be dedicated and interested in fantasy football. What I mean by that is they can be new. They may not know, a ton about fantasy football, but I recommend that they're dedicated, that they actually show both, non-verbally and verbally, yes, I'm interested. That sounds fun. That's awesome. Thanks for inviting me. If they go, yeah, I could check it out. I'm not sure if fantasy football is for me. Maybe reconsider that invitation, because you don't want people that aren't actively participating in your league or figure out after week 1 that this isn't for them. You want somebody that, whether or not they know a lot about fantasy football, they're into it because of either their relationship with you or, whatever it is. You want to make sure that they're dedicated. Next is that they have to enjoy football in some capacity. They don't have to love the NFL. They don't even have to love college football. If they've played football, if they played football in high school or middle school, or if they like high school football, or if they love college football, that would be a prerequisite in my mind. They need to know enough about the sport. What is a running back? What is a wide receiver? What does a quarterback do? How, what's a third down? What's a fourth down? What's a field goal? They need to know these sorts of things in order to actually be able to enjoy the sport of fantasy football. Next, I put this on my list of must-haves, is competitiveness. They need to have some level of competitiveness. If they don't, you're going to end up with people in your league that go, oh well, I forgot to set my roster this week. Okay, they need to be actively participating and wanting to win. If everyone in your league isn't wanting to win week to week, um, they shouldn't be part of your league. They really shouldn't. Um, Next is they must have a willingness to learn. Like I said, whether they're experienced or new to fantasy football, they have to be willing to learn more about fantasy football. I've been playing for years, and I still am learning more and more and more. Like I said, I don't know much about the salary cap. I'm just getting into that. I love it, but doing research and actually participating and being willing to learn draft strategy about players, about NFL teams, is all important. Next, they've got to have time. They've got to have time in their schedule to play. If they're a busy guy, if they're a new, dad or mom that just had a kid and they're sleeping 4 hours at night, this may not be for them because they've got to be able to, watch football, and they've got to be able to, update their rosters and be available to make trades and things like that. If they're not active because they don't have time, that's something to consider. And they also need to be able to, even if they don't have a ton of time to watch NFL games, they have to be able to respond to news and be aware of what's going on, whether it's injuries, buys, trades within the NFL, things like that. They have to be able to, maneuver within that. Next is a good relationship with you. They've got to have, in my mind, they must have a good relationship with you. There's going to be a lot of times where, as a commissioner, you're having to deal with frustrating things that happen within the league, whether it's disputes about trades or how they believe you're running the league. They've got to be able to trust you and respect your decisions as a commissioner. But I recommend having a good relationship. That also makes it just more fun to be able to banter and have that sort of trash talk, so it's not just surface level. You can actually throw them back and forth and be willing to take some punches. It makes it more fun, in my opinion. Also, I would say you need to be willing to put down money. I've found in my experience that the players that aren't willing to pay in a league are less inclined to pay attention to fantasy football or the league in general. So whether it's $5, $10, or there's a trophy or there's a consequence for losers, there's got to be some sort of buy-in for these people that are joining the league. Next is investment. They've got to be invested. It's kind of a given with the things I've been listing, but they've got to be willing to make trades. They've got to be willing to talk with the league and communicate with the league and not just be a sideline listener. And they just need to be engaged in general. They need to, if they're playing fantasy football, because it's a mostly online thing, no one's having fun if you're just logging on in the morning. Okay, who do I need to switch for my roster? Oh, Derrick Henry's got a bye week. Okay, I'm going to bring Joe Mixon in. No, you need to actually be participating and paying attention, because that's where the enjoyment and the fun is in a league. Finally, don't quit. If you are trying to bring in people that are just natural quitters in life, this is not for them. You need to bring in people that will not quit, whether they have a bad draft, whether they one of their players gets injured, or like I said in one of my earlier videos, my brother drafted what's his name? I can't remember his name. It'll come to me right after this. He drafted a player that retired within 2 hours after drafting him. If they're gonna go throw their hands up in the air and be like, okay, I'm done, the season's over, no one likes a Debbie Downer. No one likes a quitter. Get those guys out of the league. They don't need to be there, okay? Stick with it. All right, what are some things that they don't need in order to be invited to your league? Well, they don't need to love the NFL. They don't need to. I didn't when I joined fantasy football. I just loved college football. You can see around me, I'm a huge Nebraska Cornhusker fan, all right? I like, Tennessee Titans. They're a pro team. My wife's a huge Auburn fan, though, Auburn Tigers. So I just had a love for football, and that translates very well into fantasy football. They don't need to have experience in fantasy football. That's not a need. You can have new players all the time. How are you going to grow? How is fantasy football as a hobby going to grow if we're not adding new people to it? They can be new. That's fine, as long as they're invested. They also don't need to have excessive knowledge of NFL players or teams. Okay, they don't need to know that Christian McCaffrey is the number one running back off the board this year, or that Justin Jefferson's the number one wide receiver off the board this year, or that, Bijan Robinson is the number one rookie, or that, I don't know, who am I thinking about? That Justin Fields is probably overrated this year. We'll see about that. They don't need to know these things, okay? But they need to be willing to learn, right? They need to be willing to learn and have fun with it. Next, they don't need to watch every NFL game. Like I was talking about with the people that don't have time, they don't need to watch every game to participate. They just need to be aware of the things that are going on with the leagues, pay attention to the teams that are winning, the running backs that are doing well, the wide receivers that are falling off, okay? They just need to be participating in that way and at least observing what's happening in the league. They don't need to watch every game. They don't need to be there every Sunday. They also don't need to be local. So I live in Colorado. The people that I'm inviting, I have people that live in Tennessee, I have people that live in California, and I have people that live all over the state of California or Colorado. They don't need to be local. It's more fun if they're local. If you're able to do the draft in person, that makes it a heck of a lot more fun for the people that are participating in your league. You can get together, like I said, get pizza, get wings, get beer, hang out for an afternoon, make it an evening thing, spend time drafting, and make it a thing. That's a lot of fun. But they don't need to be local. If they can be, that's great. Also, they don't need to be a certain age to play fantasy football. Everyone has this, in mind that, somebody from, I guess, like college age to like 40-year-old is like the prime, because those are the people that are invested and know fantasy football. That's not necessarily the case. I just joined a league where there's like some high schoolers that are all in. They love fantasy football. And also my dad and my uncle-in-law, my wife's uncle, is that my uncle-in-law, is participating in our league. They're older guys, but they're going to love it. It's going to be a lot of fun for them. And I'm glad they're part of the league. They're going to be invested. That's all I want. So age doesn't matter. Okay. Normally it doesn't matter in life, but especially here. But that's it. Okay. So once you've brought in those players, you've sent out, invitations, you brought them on, you found an even amount of teams. Okay. You can't end with 9. You can't end with 7 or 11. Make it 8, 10, 12. Find something in there. Now that you have them, publish rules. Do it immediately. As a commissioner, make sure that you make a Word document in Google and send it out to your league so that you can edit it as time goes on, but they know what's expected for, roster settings, draft settings. I recommend checking out my video. It's my last video that I made about league settings. Go check that out so you can figure out what kind of best settings are for you and your league. I recommend doing that ASAP so that people can start orienting themselves with how you're organizing your league, and then they can prepare for the draft and prepare for the season as soon as possible. Because if you're doing that last minute, it's gonna send a signal that you're not invested, and they don't have to be invested either. So do it early and get it out to them. Also, publish the draft day and time as soon as possible. I recommend polling your league. You can do that in Sleeper very easily. You can do polls in the chat. Put some dates and times out there for people to vote on. Ideally, you want to make it so that everyone can participate in the draft. Whether it's local or wherever they are, they need to be available at least to draft. Ideally, they're in person. You can all spend a good amount of time to do it, but at least available to draft. You don't want anyone auto drafting. If they're auto drafting, that kills morale. It makes it so they're not invested in their team because they didn't draft him. They didn't have a say in Alexander Madison being on their team or taking a chance on Deebo Samuel this year after he had a downer year. They want to be invested in a team that they created. So make sure that everyone's there to do that. But that's it. Once you send that out and everyone is aware of what's the foundation of the league, you've brought in people that are invested and are excited to participate, you're good. Enjoy the season. You're all set. And there's nothing else to do at that point except for get your draft organized, go do it, and have fun. But yeah, I appreciate you guys checking out this video. Please let me know if you disagree with anything or if I said something that offended you in the must-haves. Am I wrong about any of those? Let me know in the comments down below. But otherwise, guys, please like and subscribe. And I appreciate you being here. But until then, I'll catch you next time. See you guys.